Some beauties change everything.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle Got Distracted by Beauty of Iska Bra movie. Before we start, please go support Justero9 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. He always believed his life was destined for routine until her smile changed everything. Prologue. Belle narrates. That day I saw her for the first time. That day, when everything changed for me. Where the sun felt a little warmer. Where the air smelled different. Where the world, which until then had seemed grey and monotonous to me, suddenly became tinged with colors I had never noticed before. That day I saw her smile. The most beautiful and genuine smile I have ever seen in my entire life. And I understood in a single second that beauty isn't just in what you see. There is beauty in the soul, in the way one looks, in the way one makes others feel. That day I realized. It wasn't just any ordinary day. Even though it seemed like it. It was just another one of those heavy, monotonous days where one drags one's feet through the streets of Arario. Just another one of the bunch. One who should have been lost among so many others. But that day became one that I will never ever forget. Because that was the day I met you. To the most beautiful girl I have ever seen in my entire life. To you. Iska. Normal narration. Belle's steps were slow as he walked through the streets of Arario. He was tired after another day in the dungeon, another day killing monsters non-stop. Just another day. She sighed wearily as she swung her bag of valise from side to side. At least I got a decent amount of money. Belle was a young adventurer who hadn't even been in the city of Arario for a month. The only member of the Hestia family. He lived in one of the most luxurious churches, now abandoned and on the verge of collapse, in Arario. Maybe it wasn't the best place, but at least I had a roof over my head. What a day, she thought, looking up at the sky and seeing how blue everything was. His life had been very monotonous since he arrived in Arario. He expected incredible things like the ones his grandfather told him about with his distorted reality, but nothing of the sort happened. Everything was so empty. He was waking up. He was training. I was going to jail. I went to the guild for the money. I was returning to the church. And he slept. Every day was the same routine. It wasn't that he regretted coming to Arario. In fact, that had been his wish ever since his grandfather told him the first story of that wonderful city. But he had to admit that he felt somewhat disappointed by how things were. Belle's footsteps echoed softly on the street as the breeze ruffled his white hair. Despite the sun beating down on him, he felt a slight heaviness in his chest. One that didn't come from physical exertion but from something more difficult to explain. The kind of void. As if the world would turn without him. Perhaps, he whispered, kicking a small stone in front of his worn boots. Perhaps I expected too much. Arario was majestic, yes. Imposing, full of towers, colors, people from all over the world, but all that should have thrilled him seemed distant, alien. As if he were observing everything from behind a pane of glass. He trained, he fought, he slew monsters. He strove every day to become stronger. But that burning desire in his chest, that dream of being a hero, seemed to have no clear direction. He was just another adventurer among thousands. A weak one, without fame, without name, without glory. And that, even though he didn't want to admit it, discouraged him because he had realized that being a hero was an almost impossible dream to fulfill. Not even adventurers who were already first class were considered as one. How could someone like him fulfill that dream? He wasn't even close to being halfway through level 1. Being so weak, he could never be a hero and rescue the girl as his grandfather told him. I'll be stronger, he repeated to himself in a low voice, almost as if trying to convince himself. I just need time. Although he had to admit that he was a huge ignorant fool for believing that upon arriving in Arario, he would become one of the strongest adventurers in a short time and that hundreds of girls would be crazy about him. That he would build his own little playboy house and things like that. A very stupid way of thinking, now that he had just realized it. His fingers closed tightly around the leather pouch where he kept his cash. What he'd earned that day was a decent sum. Quite good for someone of his standing. But even that felt like too little. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten anything since morning. Well, something hot would be nice. Turning the corner, Belle entered a less busy street. He had never taken that route before, but to do something different in his monotonous life, a small change would do him good. He would look for a place to buy food for himself and his goddess and return to the church to rest. At least now he had a clear objective, which was to protect his goddess and help her. If he couldn't be a hero, at least he would help the important people in his life in whatever way he could, which for the moment were only Hestia and Ina, although the latter helped him. If it weren't for his advisor, he would have already died in the dungeon. I hope I don't get lost, thought Bell, making the sign of the cross in Daedalus's labyrinth. If he got lost, at least he would do something different that day, which was to find his way home. He just hoped he wouldn't run into a criminal organization that would rob or kidnap him. It's true he wanted something different in his life, but not that different. As he moved forward, he began to notice the details of the streets. The gardener sweeping up fallen leaves in front of her stall, a child running after a pigeon with open arms, two drunks punching each other on the ground, a scantily clad woman winking at him as if she wanted to get his attention, a veteran adventurer laughing while showing his scar to two girls. And yet, none of that managed to pull him completely out of that strange state he was in. Tiredness, loneliness, monotony. There were hundreds of adventurers who, despite having been at it for years, looked full of life, eager to continue exploring the dungeon, and all that while he. Maybe that was it. Perhaps Aurario wasn't the problem. Maybe it was him. Perhaps he hadn't yet found what his grandfather really wanted him to see in that place. Some reason that makes him see that city differently. His dream of being a hero was no longer enough. If not something that will make him see how beautiful and incredible that city is, to motivate him every day. Something. But he would erase that gray color that had become normal for him. And then. Well, he was lost in thought and making the sign of the cross everywhere. He saw her. Or rather. He heard her. Ha. Don't move around so much, little one, or the makeup won't turn out right. The laugh. The laugh so clear, so sweet, so lively that it stopped Bell in his tracks. It was a warm, joyful laugh, full of life. The laugh that seemed to infect the very air and fill those dilapidated streets with joy. Bell blinked, as if something inside his chest had awakened. He didn't know why, but that voice, that sound, had pulled him in, as if he were being called without words. As if something told him he had to see the owner of such a beautiful laugh. Curious, almost unconsciously, he peered over the edge of the street. It wasn't a main avenue by any means. In fact, he was already lost since he didn't know that area, but he didn't care. The street was quiet, with a couple of humble houses, an old fountain that no longer had any water, and some flowers growing without permission between the cracks of the old street. And there. In front of one of those houses, which, judging by its appearance and atmosphere, must have been an orphanage. He saw her. Her. To an Amazon. She sat on an old, worn wooden box. She wore a simple but elegant skirt, not as revealing as those usually worn by women of her race. Her dark hair, pulled back in a neat bun, tilted her face slightly, focused on what she was doing. There were 5 children surrounding her. 3 girls, who could barely stay still with excitement, and 2 boys sitting on the floor, arms crossed, with a feigned bored expression, but their eyes looked at her attentively. The girl, that beautiful Amazon, held a small makeup box in one hand and with the other applied a soft touch of color to the cheek of one of the girls, who laughed uncontrollably. Me too, Iska. Shouted another girl, raising her hand and moving impatiently, wanting it to be her turn. Be patient, the Amazon replied with a smile so bright that Belle found it hard to look away. Once I'm done with her, you'll be next. I promise. Her voice. It wasn't just warm. It was like a blanket in winter. Like a ray of sunshine after the rain. It was such a beautiful voice. The most beautiful and warmest thing she could have ever heard. Belle swallowed unconsciously. His body was still, but his heart had sped up slightly. He didn't understand why, but something inside him reacted strongly to that presence. She wasn't simply beautiful. There was something more, something that transcended it. Next, she said with a delicate gesture, winking at the next girl. The little one, a furry-eared wolf with a tail that never stopped wagging, sat down in front of Iska with a radiant smile. We want to be as beautiful as you, Iska. The little girl said with sincere admiration, almost with devotion. Her eyes shone as if she were looking at the most wonderful person in the world. Iska let out a soft giggle at those words. But you are already very beautiful, she said in a sweet and serene tone, gently touching the girl's nose with her fingertip. This makeup will only enhance what you already have. The little girl let out a shy giggle, closing her eyes happily as the Amazon smiled sweetly again and began to apply a little makeup. Belle felt a slight pain in his chest. I didn't know why. It was as if I were watching a scene too pure to be real. As if for the first time in a long time the world had stopped being gray. As if those colors, those gestures, that laughter were made to fill empty spaces inside him. Belle's gaze shifted to the other 2 children, still sitting at the edge of the bleachers overlooking the orphanage with their arms crossed. They seemed bored, but one of them kept glancing at the makeup box with a treacherous gleam in his eyes, as if he wanted to get closer and play with all those colors, not to put on makeup, but to color or draw. And you? Iska asked, turning to them with a playful expression. Don't you want to join in? We're not children, Iska protested the older one, puffing out his cheeks as he crossed his arms more tightly in offense. She laughed, a lower laugh this time, but releasing joy. I never said I was going to do their makeup, she said as she took another small box out of her bag, this time with more intense colors and being liquid. He opened the lid and showed it as if it were a treasure chest. But I have special paint for brave warriors who fight every day to protect these princesses. What do you say? Do you want a drawing on your faces? A spider? A cat? Or perhaps a ferocious wolf? The eyes of both children lit up as if they had just received an invitation to the most fun game of their lives. I want a spider, shouted the youngest, jumping and running towards it with his arms outstretched. And I'm a dragon. One with fire, said the other as he followed him. A dragon, huh? Iska tapped her chin with a finger. That's going to be difficult, but I accept the challenge. I want a butterfly. And I'm a bird. The girls also asked. The children laughed together as the girl carefully began preparing the colors. I wasn't in a hurry or anything like that. She enjoyed every second in that place. And Belle couldn't move. I just stared at her. Without knowing why. Just feeling that something inside him had moved something inside his chest. And she knew, without fully understanding it, that she had just witnessed something she would never forget. Because it was the purest and most tender scene she had seen since arriving in the city. I knew that Amazon. Well, I didn't know her personally, but I did see her on the posters the guild put up when someone leveled up. Iska was from the Estrie family. The family that dispensed justice in the city. He had a nickname, although he couldn't remember what it was. All she knew was that in the guild they called her the decent Amazon. Why the decent Amazon? Well, she was different from all the others of her race, and that made her unique and special. Like the way she dresses. She didn't dress like the other Amazons Belle had seen before. Her clothes were beautiful and covered more than they revealed, yet they exuded a powerful femininity, much stronger than those Amazons who dressed almost naked. She didn't need to show skin for the world to realize how beautiful she was. Furthermore, she exuded something that wasn't so common among those of her race. Purity. Simply pure. Huh? At that moment, Iska finally noticed the rabbit's presence, turning to look at it with those eyes that always seemed to be shining. Belle felt his heart leap when he stared at her. It was as if the air caught in his chest. Those eyes seemed to draw him in. For a second he thought that just standing there staring at her was reckless, that it seemed strange, but how could he look away? Do you need something? Iska asked, curious but with a slight smile on her lips. Ah well and I. Belle's tongue was tangled. In his mind, all he could do was shout at himself that, because he was such an idiot, he now looked like a stalker. How could I tell her that I'd simply shut down when I saw her, my mind blank and my feet glued to the ground? It would be too embarrassing. If you want Iska to paint something on your face, you'll have to stand in line. One of the children shouted seriously, crossing his arms. Belle opened his eyes in surprise and, within seconds, his cheeks turned red. Hahaha. Iska blurted out immediately, putting one hand to her mouth while the other went down to pat the little accuser on the head. Iska's laughter wasn't mocking. It was light, warm, and playful. And Belle, paralyzed once again, could do nothing but listen, feeling each chuckle stir something in his chest. I have never heard such a genuine laugh and such a beautiful one. Do you want me to paint something on your face? A rabbit, perhaps? Iska asked, this time looking directly at the albino. Her words held no mockery, and her smile was so bright that Belle felt for a moment that he was dreaming. It was a cheerful smile, without any malice. It was as if that Amazon didn't know the bitter side of life, as if greed, envy, and all those negative feelings that polluted the city so much had never touched her. Then Belle swallowed hard and, almost shouting, replied. No. The boy who had previously accused him looked at him with a raised eyebrow, as if he suspected the rabbit was lying. I got lost, but I remembered the way. Belle explained quickly, trying to smile to hide his nervousness while avoiding her eyes. Sorry to bother you. Her voice came out louder than she intended, and in an awkward impulse, she spun around and almost ran out of the street, getting away as fast as she could. The 5 children followed him with their eyes, completely confused, their mouths slightly open at how strange it looked. What's wrong with him? One murmured. It looks weird, said another, shrugging his shoulders. Meanwhile, Iska watched him until he disappeared into the crowd. Her eyebrow arched for a moment and then, with a short sigh, she let out another soft laugh. Ahaha, he's probably new in town, she muttered to herself, remembering the albino's embarrassed expression and how his ears seemed to be burning. I hope he finds his way back home. Then she turned towards the little ones who were waiting anxiously with their faces painted in colors. Great. Who's next? Me. Shouted one, raising his hands. It's my turn. Protested another, gently pushing him. The youngest of them all, with a mustache clumsily painted on her face that she herself had requested, gently tugged on Iska's dress and asked excitedly. Iska, are you going to sleep with us at the orphanage tonight? The Amazon touched her chin with a finger as if she were truly considering her answer. Then she smiled, beaming with joy. "Let me see," she whispered, prolonging the tension for a few seconds. Finally, she snapped her fingers. "Yes. I'll stay." The children let out a shout of celebration. She just watched them with tenderness. How could he not love that orphanage if he had spent his entire childhood there? That place was his first home, even before he met Istri. Iska hugged them, feeling that warmth that always made her feel complete, then separated and smiled. "Let's continue," he exclaimed, raising the paintbrush as if it were a sword. "Yes." They all replied excitedly and began to argue about who would be next. Meanwhile, with Belle. The albino was lying on the ground, breathing heavily and in some pain. In front of him rose some steps with many steep ones that seemed like the slightest mistake could make you fall just like him. He had rolled down them all like a sack of potatoes, with no time to stop his fall, until he ended up a mess at the bottom with dirty clothes and an aching body. He sat up slowly, placing one hand on the ground as he let out a groan. "Ugh, it hurts." His face was red, although it wasn't so easy to tell if it was from the blows or something else. The burning in her cheeks mingled with embarrassment and her heart was still beating too fast, as if she hadn't yet managed to escape that gaze. Belle closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm himself. But no matter how hard he tried, all he could think about was Iska's smile. A wide, clear, luminous smile that seemed to break down all his defenses. And worse still, the laughter. That light, beautiful laugh, like a song that could not be forgotten. It was as if she had bewitched him. The rabbit brought both hands to its face, covering itself, feeling the heat consuming it from within. I must have looked pathetic, he thought bitterly, recalling the clumsy way he'd run away. His voice was shaky, he was stuttering, his escape was ridiculous, and to top it all off, he'd fallen down the steps. At least I hadn't seen him roll around like a fool. Thank goodness, she whispered, letting out a sigh of relief. But that excuse did not completely alleviate the pang of shame in her chest. He sat there for a few more seconds, gazing at the sky through the city rooftops, trying to catch his breath. He felt as if his life had taken an unexpected turn in a matter of minutes. "Ugh, and I didn't buy the food," she suddenly remembered, falling back onto the floor, extending her arms as if she were giving up. The cool breeze passed over him, bringing with it the murmurs of the city and the echo of laughter that still lingered in his memory. Perhaps those gray days, always the same, monotonous, full of routine and silence, would no longer be like that. Perhaps, after all, destiny was showing him a different path. And deep in his heart, he heard that laugh again, that beautiful laugh. Without knowing it, that life would soon be filled with color for him. End of prologue. Chapter 1. Belle narrates. I never really believed in love at first sight. It is true that when I arrived in the city I expected to save some beautiful lady and that she would be smitten by my incredible entrance and so on. A really silly way of thinking. Sometimes I feel like going back to the past and giving that old self a good whack to make it see reason. In the end. The more time I spent in this wonderful city called Aurario, the more I realized the truth and that those silly fantasies were nothing more than that, fantasies. Nobody became a hero overnight. No one would achieve strength in a short time. Nobody fell in love at first sight. Well. That last part, maybe so. Because what I feel right now I don't know how to explain it. Could it be considered love at first sight? A few days ago I thought it was nonsense, but now I'm going through that nonsense myself. It was impossible to have fallen in love at first sight. But I had to admit that the first impression that Amazon gave me left me smitten. It's hard to explain. It's not like the stories my grandfather used to tell me, where the hero saved the princess and love blossomed from the adrenaline. This was different. Much calmer. More real. I saw her painting the children's faces with such delicacy, with such a genuine smile, that I felt something inside me break and rebuild itself at the same time. It wasn't her physical beauty that struck me, although I have to admit she's a very beautiful girl, but mainly her smile. It was the way she smiled. The way her eyes sparkled with pure joy as she played with those children. The way her laughter made me feel like the sun had risen again. It's as if the emptiness I felt inside me, the emptiness that had been following me since I arrived in Aurario, was suddenly filled with his presence. The world was no longer gray. Its colors returned suddenly and they all pointed toward her. Damn, I can't believe I'm thinking all this. But I'm not in love. But still. After that encounter. I couldn't stop thinking about her. And his name. Iska. The way she smiled. And her laughter. Odd, her laughter. It made me want to listen to it again and again. That day I ran away like an idiot. Like a scared rabbit. I was so embarrassed I could barely stammer a few words, and instead of apologizing for standing there like a moron, I made up a ridiculous excuse. I got lost, but I remembered the way. Who says that? I look like a fool. I'm still a little embarrassed to remember it well, quite embarrassed. But since yesterday, since I saw that scene full of purity, I only have one question. Will I ever see her again? Well, I hope so, and I promise my stiff grandfather that I won't make a fool of myself. I swear. Normal narration. Our albino protagonist was walking through the streets of Arario once again. Only this time it was different from the day before. He didn't have that bored, empty look. Now she was a little more lively and curious, as if she were expecting to see someone. Yes, to that beautiful Amazon. Why am I looking for her? Belle thought, stopping in the square of Babel. He had left his enormous mansion to go to the dungeon, but instead he was looking around for that girl. He looked like a stupid stalker. Who was it? Freya. I look stupid. What will I gain by seeing her? I don't even plan on talking to her or anything, he thought, scratching his cheek as he watched people pass by. It is true that she had made a very good impression on him without having done practically anything, that already said a lot about her. She always looked at her level up sign with the other members of her family, she was curious why they called her the decent Amazon, and well, she had found out yesterday. But still, why look for her? They didn't know each other and he hesitated to talk to her, so why? The sea of color would return to that gray day. Could be. But even so, the best thing was to continue with his normal day like everyone else. I didn't want to seem like a stalker or anything like that. Perhaps it was just a simple coincidence that everything suddenly changed color, he thought, shaking his head slightly. He tried to convince himself it was just a passing curiosity. A fleeting interest. But his heart beat differently every time he thought of her. A rhythm not from fear of the dungeon or the adrenaline of combat, but from the mere thought of seeing her. He wondered if she thought about him too. The boy she laughed at. The one who ran away like a scared rabbit. Most likely not. To her, he was just another face in the sea of people in Arario. A funny incident from the afternoon. He would never have such an impact on anyone as she had on him. Yes, that must be it, he murmured to himself, trying to calm the storm of emotions he felt. I was simply tired. That's why everything looks so gray. And that's why I felt that strange sensation, yes, that was it. But even as he thought that, something inside him didn't believe it. He remembered every detail about her. The sparkle in her eyes, the way her hair moved softly when she laughed, the delicate touch of her fingers as she applied her makeup. It wasn't a simple coincidence. It was something more. Something his grandfather had never told him about in his stories of heroes. He shook his head forcefully, as if he could shake off those thoughts, and slapped himself to bring himself to his senses. He knew exactly what he wanted to do that day. To the dungeon. I have to go to the dungeon and save money to get out of this damned poverty, but first I think I'll go to the guild. I would talk to Ina and ask her if I could go down one more floor than I was allowed. He wanted to earn a little more money and, at the same time, prove to himself that he could become stronger, that he could fulfill his dream. She would bring color to her gray world as her dreams came true. He would achieve it. And with those thoughts, Belle began walking towards the guild with somewhat calm steps, trying not to think too much about the Amazon from the previous day. It's not love at first sight, I just didn't expect to see something like this, yes, that's it, he thought, managing to visualize the guild. I would talk to Ina. I'd go to jail. I would make 10 million valis. I would buy a house. And that's it. He already had his goals for the day. All that was left was to achieve them, and most likely he would only achieve the first two. But since. I hope Ina doesn't get angry for asking to go further down, he thought, although it was more than obvious that she would scold him. But I had nothing to lose by trying. That's how I arrived at the guild and crossed the enormous doors. And perhaps by simple coincidence or perhaps by fate, he almost bumped into someone the moment he entered. That's what happens when you walk around with your head down. Fortunately, he managed to brake in time, and so did the person he was about to collide with. I'm sorry. Belle quickly apologized, hoping that the person wouldn't get angry and punch him. Don't worry. It was an accident. And that voice. That beautiful voice reached him. He quickly looked up to make sure his hearing hadn't deceived him. And it wasn't like that. Standing in front of him was she. That same Amazon with her bright eyes full of joy and purity. She was there and next to her was another girl who was probably related to her. Belle's feet froze to the ground. The air in her lungs left her. She had been trying her hardest to convince herself that the previous encounter had been a coincidence, an anomaly, but there she was again, as if fate were mocking her monotonous life. And as I expected. The gray color he always observed began to change color the moment she appeared. Everything around her changed to bright colors. She was even more beautiful up close than he remembered. Her smile was so warm, so genuine, that for a moment he forgot where he was. Next to the Amazon was another girl from the Istri family. It was Iska, the dwarf, who was curiously looking at the albino, but why was she looking at him curiously if she had just met him? well, because of the way he was looking at her friend. I knew that look perfectly. Several boys had looked at Iska that way when they met her, I could perfectly remember that type of look. And another one falls into Iska's trap, and another broken heart thought Ista with an anime-style sweat drop, already knowing how that story would end. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in a relationship. The same phrase that Iska repeated every time a boy confessed his feelings to her. It was a classic. Are you alright? Iska asked, tilting her head slightly. Her eyes shone with the same purity that had disarmed him the day before. Belle blushed immediately. The ridiculousness he had promised not to display was beginning to creep in. He felt like a rabbit trapped under his own gaze. Why yes I'm fine, he said, wanting to punch himself for having stuttered. Meanwhile, the Amazon just stared at Belle with narrowed eyes, making him even more embarrassed, and Asta shook his head slightly at her reaction. Until later, when he remembered it, he opened his eyes. Oh. You're the boy who got lost yesterday, she said, smiling happily again. Did you find your way home? Or are you still lost? Why yes, I mean no. I'm not lost, I already found my house heh. The punch in the face from Otter is what he needed to stop acting like a jerk. He's definitely another poor soul who fell for Iska's charms, Asta thought, already feeling sorry for the poor rabbit. Well, at least thanks to the rejection he would have character development and become strong. That, or I'd fall into depression. Wow. I'm so glad. Last night I was wondering if you'd found your way back. Luckily you did. Elle couldn't help but feel embarrassed when he heard that she had been thinking about him. But it wasn't because of what he thought, but because of his stupid lie that he was lost. Now he probably thought he had a bad sense of direction and was stupid. Why yes, luckily I made it. He was praying to all the gods not to say something stupid, something that was very normal for him when he was nervous. Iska gave him a warm and relieved smile. For a moment, Belle felt truly special, even though the embarrassment of his lie still burned in his cheeks. Iska moved a little closer, and the soft floral scent of her perfume made Belle's heart leap again. Well, since we've exchanged words, it would be proper to introduce ourselves, Iska said, tilting her head slightly with a curious look. My name is Iska Bra. What's your name, you boy who gets lost in the street? Belle felt a wave of happiness and nervousness at the same time. Her kindness disarmed him. She was the first person, besides his goddess, who had spoken to him so sweetly in Arario. I would say Ina too, but she always spoke to him angrily, and with good reason. I'm bellcranel, he murmured, his voice still trembling but firmer than before. The pleasure is all mine, Miss Iska. Iska smiled again, and at that moment, Belle realized that her smile was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. What was happening to him? The pleasure is all mine, Belle, she said in a soft pleasant tone. I hope to see you again, but not lost this time, haha. Asta, who had been silently watching them, giggled and covered her mouth with her hand. Belle looked at her, confused, but the little girl quickly composed herself. Iska, we have to go, the others are waiting for us at the entrance to the dungeon, and you know very well how Kaguya gets when they make her wait. Oh. I had forgotten, Kaguya must be filled with rage. Asta shook his head slightly, seeing how forgetful Iska could be sometimes. It was a pleasure meeting you, Belle. Take care. And with that, the Amazon left, followed by Asta, who stopped in front of the rabbit. I'm sorry, the dwarf apologized, patting him on the shoulder and continuing on her way. Although Belle didn't understand why she said that, or rather, he didn't pay attention. The crowd around him seemed to have vanished. His mind was blank, except for a single image. Iska's smile. He turned around to watch her walk away, observing her cheerful gait as she talked and smiled, the colors around her shining brighter than before. He stood there for a moment watching her until he lost sight of her, but even then he didn't move. His mind had disconnected, trying to process what had happened. The girl who had pulled him out of his gloomy world had not only remembered him, but had also spoken to him kindly. She had called him by his name, something so simple, yet it brought him happiness. A silly grin spread across her face. The embarrassment of the previous moment vanished, replaced by a palpable happiness. Her heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the joy she felt. The world was no longer gray. Its colors were now more vibrant than ever. It was strange. It was all really strange, everything I was feeling. After that, his eyes fell on his advisor Ina, who seemed to have been watching him since he joined the guild. I had to ask him a question, a very important one to clear up his doubts. Ina-san. I called her Belle when I was already close to her, the half-elf had a bored expression watching him arrive. Ina-san, I have a question I'd like to know. No, Belle-kun, the Amazon girl from the Estrie family doesn't have a boyfriend, Ina replied, long before Belle could finish his question. Huh? Belle was surprised to hear what Ina said, then blushed. How did you know that How did I know you were going to ask that question? Ina interrupted him again. Easy, you're not the first one to come up to me with that question. I know perfectly well the expressions on boys' faces when they want to know about her. Ina adjusted her tie and her glasses while smiling. Don't underestimate me, Belle-kun, I've been doing this for years. Belle was speechless. His face burned, not only with embarrassment but also with the fact that he had been so predictable. Ina, with her astute gaze, had completely disarmed him. He realized that his advisor, despite her serious and strict demeanor, was very observant. And in case you're wondering, Ina continued in a tone Belle knew well, she's a lost cause. She's the decent Amazon everyone talks about. She gets more than 10 love confessions a month and her only response is always the same. Sorry, but I'm not interested in a relationship. Ina's smile was a mixture of mockery and pity. Mockery at how quickly her adventurer fell in love and pity because she didn't want his little heart broken. Belle felt his heart sink a little. For a moment he had felt special, but Ina had brought him crashing back to reality. He was just one more in the crowd. One more of the many who had fallen in love with the sweet and beautiful Iska. And one more that would be on their rejection list. Without realizing it, he had just admitted that he had fallen in love with her. Only 2 encounters were enough to make him fall in love. So my advice, Belle-kun, Ina said, gently tapping him on the head with a rolled-up piece of paper, is to focus on your work and studies. The dungeon is waiting for you. Save up, level up, and become a decent adventurer, not like those arrogant misers. And don't worry, I'm sure a sweet girl will take a liking to you. For example, Ina. Misha shouted from afar, receiving a strong blow from Rose. The elf was a little embarrassed but still maintained her composure. I don't want to clip your wings, Belle-kun, but she's rejected so many that it's likely the same will happen to you, and I don't want to see you depressed. To be honest, the best thing is to focus on your goals, I'm sure you'll achieve them, the half-elf tried to encourage him. Belle sighed. Ina was right. Love wasn't like in his grandfather's stories. It wasn't a simple fairy tale. And what he felt for Iska was nothing more than one of those fantasies he had so often criticized. He would be no different from the others. He would probably be rejected. But when he looked up, he realized he wasn't as discouraged as he should be. Ina might be right about everything, but there was something she didn't know. She didn't know how Belle felt when he saw Iska's smile. She didn't know how the world filled with color when he saw her. And she didn't know what Iska had told him. I hope to see you again, Belle. That little phrase repeated itself in her mind and suddenly the discouragement vanished completely. A smile more determined than ever before spread across her face. Ina looked at him, surprised and puzzled. What's wrong? Why the smile? Nothing, Ina-san. I'm just happy, he whispered, looking down. Ina crossed her arms, confused. She knew her adventurer and knew how stubborn he could be. He's not going to give up, Ina thought, shaking her head slightly. Well, if he did give up, then he wouldn't be Belle-kun. See you later, Ina-san, I have to go to the dungeon and thank you. And with that said, he turned around and left the guild. He wasn't going to the dungeon to earn money or to become stronger, though those were partly his goals, but he was going for something more. He was going to prove to Iska and to himself that he wasn't just another kid. He was going to prove Ina wrong. That his grandfather's stories weren't just fantasies. That perhaps he could achieve it, and if he didn't, he wanted that Amazon to fill that gray world with colors forever. And with that new purpose, he headed to the entrance of the dungeon with his heart filled with a new kind of courage. But first. Ina-san. Belle returned to the guild. What's wrong now? He asked, feeling like he was going to ask her something silly. Can I go down more floors in the dungeon? Haha, Belle-kun, you don't understand, do you? But nothing, and now that you mention it, we have to study. The Ina-san. I said to study. Ugh. Well, if I wanted to be someone strong, then I had to make sacrifices. From now on, his days would not be as monotonous as he thought. End of chapter. Chapter 2. Belle narrates. If falling in love at first sight is a crime, then Iska should be thrown in jail. I don't understand. I just don't understand it. How is it possible that, after only seeing it twice, it has already entered my mind so deeply? Is it witchcraft? Or some kind of spell that even the best wizards can't detect? No. It's something simpler and at the same time more complicated. I simply can't get her beautiful smile and her beautiful voice out of my head. It doesn't make sense. A week has passed since that day at the guild and I haven't seen her again, which is good. Because I want to have a better image of myself the next time I see her. I don't want to find myself stuttering, staring at the ground like a lost child. I want to be better. I want her to see me not just as the boy who got lost in the street that day. I want her to see someone who has goals, who doesn't give up, who is willing to listen to her and understand her. I want to be someone she can be proud of, even if she doesn't have any reason to be yet. Someone who isn't just another adventurer in this sea of people that is Aurario, but someone who would be willing to fight for it. For its justice and for mine. Wow, I was definitely smitten. I wonder if other versions of me fall in love with a simple action from a beautiful girl. It's ridiculous, I know. I promised myself I'd leave behind those silly fantasies that make you see everything through rose-colored glasses and that everything is easy, just like I imagined when I arrived in Aurario, but this time it's different. This time that fantasy is pushing me to be stronger. It's giving me a purpose. If that means being a lovesick fool, then I'll be the strongest lovesick fool in all of Aurario. The funny thing is, I catch myself thinking absurd things. Like, does she like tea or coffee? Does she prefer elegant or comfortable clothes? Does she find my style strange? Now that I think about it, I only have this darn brown sweater my hairstyle. Can I show up the way I always do? No. I can't show up with the same hairstyle and clothes as always, I have to change something that says bellcranel is here so hold on tight. And there I am, talking to my reflection in a shop window as I walk past a display of clothes I probably can't afford, even though they look cheap, maybe I need to change my wardrobe. Whatever. I have to make an effort. Not just because I'm in love. If not, also to take advantage of that motivation and be a better version of myself. That way, if she rejects me, at least I will have improved as a person. But not. No negative thoughts. Oh Belle. When you see her alone smile. A confident smile. Not the idiotic one, the other one, the hexy one. I'm ready. Ready to find her again. This time I'm not going to run away. This time I'm going to speak. I'm going to look her in the eyes, and even if my hands sweat and my voice trembles, I'm going to say something. Anything. I don't care if my brain decides to abandon me at that moment, which is what it always does. This time I'm going to stay. I'll be the coolest one here. Perrin. I don't even know what it means, but it sounds amazing. I'll be the coolest. Really? Normal narration. After being lost in thought for a long time, Belle came to his senses, realizing that he was still in front of that clothing store. The wide variety of clothes behind those enormous glass windows. After observing the clothes under his gaze to see what he was wearing. That brown vest and that black shirt, he looked like a photograph in that outfit. And the worst part is that his closet was full of that same type of clothing. Ami-sama has told me many times to change my clothes, Belle thought with an anime-style sweat drop. I never paid attention to it, but I think he's right. It wasn't just because he was in love. I really needed a change. A haircut. No, he still didn't feel ready to let go of his beautiful hair. First things first. Some new rags. I earned some money in the dungeon, I hope it's enough for something decent. With those thoughts, and taking her bag with Alice Belle, she entered the store hoping to find something she liked. When he entered the store the bell rang and the classic smell of new clothes reached him. Now that I think about it, this is the first time I've ever been in a clothing store, she thought, noticing that detail. Oh, well. Shrugging, Belle took a step, but before he could take another, a human girl approached him with a friendly smile. Good afternoon. How can we help you? He asked, still smiling, that classic salesman smile. And no, I'm just looking at clothes for the moment, Belle replied with a nervous smile. Ah, the typical response of poor people who just pass by to observe. The fact that. Perfect. Look for clothes that you like, if you have any questions don't hesitate to look for me. And with that said, the woman left, maintaining that fake smile. Belle stood still for a moment, watching the saleswoman walk away with that overly rehearsed gait. The typical response of poor people. She repeated softly, feeling a drop of sweat trickle down her neck. Is it that obvious? She sighed and decided not to dwell on it any longer. She had a goal, and that goal was hanging on one of those hooks, or at least that's what she wanted to believe. He moved slowly through the aisles, his hands behind his back, as if to avoid the temptation of touching something he couldn't afford. The mannequins stared down at him from their pedestals, immaculate, dressed in perfectly coordinated clothes he could never buy. Of course, you don't have to worry about washing anything or the sweat from the dungeon, he murmured, looking away. You always look great. She walked past a black jacket with silver details. She stopped. The fabric shimmered in the store's light. This looks great, she whispered, reaching out to touch it. If I wear this, will I look more, I don't know, imposing? He imagined himself for a second walking into the guild wearing that jacket, greeting Iska with a casual nod. She would be smiling. He would respond with a witty remark while Aina watched him from behind in surprise. Yes, of course, and then I wake up, he shook his head and hung up his jacket again. On another coat rack, a dark purple sweater caught her eye. Well, at least it's not coffee. He picked it up and placed it in front of him, looking at himself in a nearby mirror. Nah, it looks like I'm going to be serving coffee in a fancy restaurant, I whispered, putting it back in its place. He spent several minutes like this, picking up and putting back clothes, imagining versions of himself he'd never tried to be. Until, suddenly, his eyes fell on a white shirt made of lightweight fabric, with a slightly open collar and sleeves that hugged his arm. Simple, yet elegant. "This one," she whispered. He touched her gently, as if she were something fragile. For some reason, he could imagine himself with her, walking beside Iska. Not drawing too much attention, but looking different. Someone much better. She looked in the mirror again, this time with a half smile. If this doesn't turn me from lost adventurer into interesting man, then I don't know what else to do." He sighed and looked at the label, his eyes almost popping out of his head when he saw the price. Ouch. He immediately lowered the price. It was more expensive than he expected. With that money he could easily buy himself a suit of armor and a new dagger. In fact, why didn't she buy that instead of casual clothes? "Well, if I ever died in the dungeon, at least I'd die in style. Well, first I'll look at everything, then I'll cry about the prices, and then I'll decide what to buy. In this section you will never find interesting clothes, all these clothes, even if they are eye-catching, were made without care." Bell opened his eyes in surprise upon hearing a voice behind his back. I couldn't believe it. That sweet and beautiful voice again. Slowly, still unable to believe it, he turned around, and there he saw her. Iska was about 2 meters away from him, watching him with that beautiful smile that had captivated him from the first moment. "Hello. Bell, right?" she greeted, tilting her head slightly, unsure if she had said the name wrong. Bell felt his hands turn to stone and his throat dry out faster than a drop of water in the desert. "Why yes," he managed to reply, barely audible. "It's Bell." Iska smiled a little more. That smile. That damned and blessed smile that completely disarmed him. Each time, those gray days became filled with color the more I looked at her. "I'm glad I wasn't wrong," she said softly, but with that confidence she always exuded. She took a couple of steps toward him and glanced at the white shirt Bell was still holding, making him nervous at the proximity. Buying new clothes. Bell looked at the shirt as if he had just realized he was holding it. "Ah yes, well, more or less. Just watching." "Looking," she repeated, with a slight glint of amusement in her eyes, as if she enjoyed seeing the rabbit's nervous behavior. "And what exactly are you looking for?" Bell scratched the back of his neck, feeling all the mental preparation he'd done for this moment vanish like smoke. "Something different." "Different for you or for someone in particular?" Iska asked, tilting her head with interest, showing that she was very curious and would ask the question without hesitation. Bell swallowed. That wasn't fair. How was he supposed to answer without looking like an idiot? What would I say to her? That I only had the same style of clothes and that I wanted to change? No. I had to answer simply. "Let's just say so I don't always look the same," she improvised, trying to maintain her composure. "You know, to change things up a bit." I was having a conversation with Iska. I had to control myself and not scare her. He had to take control of his mind. I understand." Iska smiled again, but this time it was different, softer, almost as if she knew something. "Well, if you want, I can help you choose. I have a good eye for these things, a very good eye," she whispered, winking playfully. Bell felt his heart leap when he saw that wink. The more I looked at her, the more beautiful she became. "It would be nice if it's not too much trouble," he agreed nervously, but not letting this opportunity to spend time with the Amazon pass him by. "Not at all." She smiled happily, delighted that she had accepted her help in choosing clothes. "Not to brag, but when it comes to fashion, I never make a mistake. I'm perfect in those aspects." Damn, I'm starting to sound like allies. Bell just watched, smiling a little embarrassed as he scratched his cheek. Had she always been like this? Someone so friendly to people. For some reason, he seemed to be one of those people who could always somehow manage to have a conversation with someone, no matter who it was. In short, he had before him the most sociable person he had ever met. "It's so radiant," she thought, watching the colors around her shine brighter. "But like I said, you won't find anything suitable for you in this section. Follow me. I know the perfect section in this store." And with an excited smile she began to walk and Belle just followed her slowly, smelling the sweet aroma she left in her wake. He was usually bothered by sweet things, even those outrageously smelly perfumes that many women used were annoying to him. But Iska's scent was so pleasant and soft. The more he got to know her, the more things he liked about her. "And here it is," exclaimed the Amazon, arriving at the furthest section of the entire store, a section that apparently wasn't visited as much since it was at the very back. "Wow," Belle whispered, looking at the large amount of clothing in the place. The clothes were very nice, much nicer than the clothes displayed at the entrance. I felt sorry that she was so forgotten in that corner. "Here are some pants and shirts that would fit you perfectly," Iska began, a sparkle of excitement appearing in her eyes as she searched for the clothes, a much happier and more hopeful sparkle than usual. It was as if that section was special to her. Very special. Belle, curious, picked up a garment at random and examined it. The fabric was cool and very comfortable, much more so than the fabrics in the other sections. I don't know about you, but these clothes look like they were made with a lot of love. And there are all kinds of styles. I'm sure you'll find something that catches your eye. She continued, her eyes sparkling with excitement. For example, this shirt would look great with your hair or this one. You have such a striking appearance. I'm sure everything will look good on you. Belle was embarrassed to hear those words and looked away. Iska's way of acting was somewhat flirtatious, even if she herself didn't realize it. It seemed to be part of her personality. Oh. However, Belle noticed that Iska's tone changed to a slightly more dejected one as she looked at his shirt. It's been over a year and you're still here, he whispered, barely audible, with a slightly disheartened smile. But seconds later she smiled happily again, as was normal for her. Come on. We have to keep looking. Belle found this behavior strange. He knew almost nothing about the Amazon, but even for him, this change in attitude was very sudden. So out of curiosity he looked at one of the shirt labels, just to see who made them. And when he saw the name, he opened his eyes in surprise. Iska bra. It was the small print on the shirt label. And not only that one. I checked for more, and they also had the name of the Amazon who was still looking for clothes or giving Belle advice about clothing, without turning to look at him. This small section, Belle whispered, looking around. That section in an abandoned corner. That place was clothing made by Iska herself. This jacket would look perfect on you and would match these pants. Iska continued talking, looking for the perfect outfit for Belle. Well, he just kept watching her, then looked at the clothes again. I don't understand why is such beautiful clothing hidden from people's view. She thought, still unable to grasp it. Even the price was cheap compared to the clothes at the entrance which had ridiculous prices. Here they had affordable prices for him, even though he knew that each of those garments was worth much more. So she wants to keep it a secret, he thought, watching her continue listing the pros and cons of wearing that jacket. After that, Belle's gaze shifted to another shirt, this one a shade of blue, which he picked up. The fabric was soft, with neat stitching and details he hadn't seen on other garments. And as was obvious. It had the name Iska bra on the label. This, she said softly. This is incredible. Iska turned to look at him, still holding the jacket in her hands. Yes. Do you like it? He asked, trying to sound casual, but there was a slight glimmer of anticipation in his eyes, as if trying to control his excitement. I must admit it would look very good on you. Belle nodded with a small smile. I really like it. In fact, all the clothes in this section are like this. They have something special about them. I don't know how to explain it. Her voice lowered slightly. It's as if each garment has a story. He wasn't just saying it to praise Iska now that he knew she was his creation. In fact, he had thought about it since he entered that section, it was what he truly thought. For a moment, Iska remained silent, as if her words had touched her more than she realized. Then, she looked away and smiled softly, almost shyly. Wow, I didn't think you had such a good eye, he murmured, in a tone that hid something more than simple flattery. Belle took the jacket she had shown him earlier and tried it on. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for him. It's not just beautiful, it's also comfortable. It feels, she paused, searching for the words. It feels like something you want to wear every day. Iska let out a small laugh, but a different emotion shone in her eyes, a mixture of pride and gratitude. And also a touch of embarrassment, though she knew how to hide it perfectly. Well, if you keep talking like that I'm going to end up believing you're a fashion expert, haha, I laughed, trying to act natural. I'm not, Belle denied, smiling a little more. But I can recognize something made with love when I see it. Iska looked at him for another second, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she only returned a smile that, although discreet, was warmer than any she had ever seen from him before. It was different from all those radiant smiles he had given her before. Although she was small, her smile shone much brighter than any other, and the colors around her grew larger. Then I think we have your perfect outfit, she said, trying to return to her usual cheerful tone. I knew we'd find something you'd like here. It's all thanks to you, you have a good eye for choosing. You're right. It's my specialty. And I'm proud of it. Belle took off his jacket, feeling the soft fabric one last time. Iska's happiness was contagious, and for a moment he felt completely at ease, as if there were no world of difference between them. So, what do you say? Will you take this one? She asked, gently picking up the jacket. Or we can keep looking. There are still plenty of clothes you haven't seen that I'm sure you love. Belle looked at the jacket, then he looked at Iska. I think this is fine, Belle said with a genuine smile. I don't want to take up too much of your time. You must have things to do. Iska looked at him in surprise. Things to do? More important than helping you? Of course not. Fashion is my passion. Helping people look their best is part of my justice. Belle was speechless. The sincerity in her voice was so pure. It was the first time she had ever seen such sincerity in someone. "You're your justice?" he asked in a soft voice. Iska smiled again, but this time it was a smile with a touch of melancholy. "Yes. My justice. Beauty isn't just about clothes or makeup. It's about how you feel about yourself. If you feel good, if you look good, your surroundings become more beautiful." Her voice trailed off and she glanced around at the garments she had created. "I just want to help people find that beauty within themselves." Belle understood immediately. He remembered his own past, his monotonous life, his worn-out clothes. And how she, with her mere presence, had filled his world with color. So I could confirm that his justice was more than true. "I see," he said, nodding slowly. "It's a very beautiful kind of justice." Iska's eyes opened slightly as if she hadn't expected that answer, lowering her gaze with a smile that was perhaps happy or a little shy at the praise. "Thank you, Belle," she said, her tone softer than ever. There was a warmth in her words that made Belle feel he'd discovered something very important about her. "Well, off to the checkout," she said, returning to her cheerful, radiant tone. Belle could only smile at her attitude. Although she was beautiful, her personality was what stood out most about her. He was able to understand this through their interaction in that store. With calm steps they both approached a box where the woman who received Belle was. When she saw that he was wearing clothes, she adopted a firm stance worthy of a salesman. Although he frowned slightly when he saw that Iska was with him. "I'll take this shirt and this jacket," Belle said, placing the garments on the counter while the Amazon stayed behind with a happy smile. The woman saw the clothes with a raised eyebrow. She already knew perfectly well which section those clothes came from. "What a choice," the woman whispered in a neutral tone. "But wouldn't you prefer to wear clothes from the entrance? These garments you've chosen look like they'll fall apart after just a few uses. They're not very good quality." Iska just looked away when she heard that, fearing that Belle would change his mind and take others. "No, these are perfect for me," Belle said, but he didn't hesitate to deny the girl's suggestion, making Iska smile again. "In fact, I'm surprised that such well-made clothes are hidden away in a secluded corner." Everyone has their place," the woman said boredly, starting to fold the clothes and put them in a bag. "That'll be 6,000 valis." Belle felt a drop of sweat form when he heard the price. He was genuinely surprised at how cheap it was. "I think a plate of Mamma Mia is worth more," she thought with a nervous smile, handing over the money and receiving the bag. "Thank you very much for your purchase, please come again soon," the woman said, bidding farewell with the classic salesperson's goodbye. Belle turned to leave and the moment she did, Iska took the opportunity to stick her tongue out at the cashier, making her click her tongue in annoyance. With the purchase completed, they both left the store, Belle satisfied with having a new set of clothes and Iska happy with the purchase the albino made. "Well, it's nice to have a new set of clothes," Belle said, holding the bag with both hands. "Thanks for helping me. Without you, I probably would have gone out in my usual sweater." Iska smiled happily upon hearing that. "I'm glad I could help, Belle. It's a pleasure helping people look their best," she whispered, placing her hands behind her back. Belle nodded. They remained silent for a moment, simply enjoying each other's company. The afternoon sun was setting and the streetlights were beginning to illuminate their faces. Belle felt he could stay there forever, just watching her. But I knew that this little adventure between them had already come to an end. "Well," Iska said, breaking the silence. "I think it's time for me to go. I'm glad to have found you again, Belle." "Me too," Belle said, with a genuine smile. "Really, thank you for your help." Iska nodded, her smile warm and radiant. "I hope to see you again, Belle. And next time I hope you're not lost," he joked, letting out a soft laugh. Belle chuckled a little and nodded. "I won't be. I promise." "Well, take care. And you look great in those clothes." With those words, Iska turned and walked away, her figure fading into the crowd. Belle watched her until she was completely gone. Her heart was pounding and a silly smile had spread across her face. The bag in her hand, the new clothes, were no longer just clothes. They were a symbol of a new beginning. A symbol of a new purpose. A symbol of the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time it wouldn't be just another story of unrequited love. Yes, he was getting his hopes up too much, but that interaction really made him happy. He even surprised himself that he hadn't stuttered halfway through the conversation. Perhaps because Iska somehow had that air about her that made everyone feel comfortable around her. She was a unique girl. "Well, time to show Kami-sama my new clothes," she whispered happily. She turned around and walked home, wearing a new outfit and with a heart full of new feelings. The road no longer seemed gray. Now everything was full of bright colors and everyone. Somehow. They were taking him to her. End of chapter. Chapter 3. Iska narrates. Is it normal for me to feel happy? Well, I'm usually in a good mood, but these last few days I don't know, it's like my happiness has risen a little more, like it's bubbling inside me. I wouldn't know how to explain it well, but I feel very motivated. Motivated to create many more clothing styles, to draw new sketches until I ran out of ink, to mix fabrics I had never used before. Although to be honest, most of those clothes are worn only by my friends and end up going unnoticed by outsiders. But it doesn't matter. As long as the few customers I have like the clothes I make, then I'm happy. Like him, for example. The boy who gets lost in the streets. I don't know exactly what it was, but it gave me enormous joy to hear her opinion about a garment that I made myself. This is the first time I've heard the opinion of someone other than my friends or a street-sama. And to be honest, it was much more embarrassing than I thought. Come on, Iska, breathe, don't stutter. I kept repeating it to myself while he was talking at that moment. Oh my god. I had to muster all my willpower not to blush like a little girl. And I'm used to men complimenting me. Yes, it sounds a bit conceited, I know, but they often tell me I'm pretty, that my smile lights up the room, things like that, and while it makes me happy to hear it, it rarely makes me nervous. But this time it was different. Hearing him say that each garment has a story. Each garment is special and gives the feeling of wanting to wear it all the time. I don't know, it affected me differently. It made me feel more proud of my work than of my own appearance. And that is new to me. Perhaps that's why I still remember his voice, the way he said it, so sincerely, as if he truly believed it. It was impossible not to smile when I remembered that. In the end. Apparently I've gained a new client, I need to put extra effort into the next outfits if I don't want to disappoint him and my future clients. But of course now I have another little problem, I don't want him to find out that I'm the one who makes the clothes. It would be too embarrassing. Although now that I think about it, my name is embroidered in the inner panels. But nobody sees the panels, right? Right. I shake my head, trying to push the thought away. There's no time to worry about that. Okay, putting that aside. The day is a special day. I'm going to visit my little brothers and my grandmother at the orphanage. I promised them I would bring them new clothes, and I intend to keep that promise. I'll finish breakfast and head over there. I can already imagine their faces when I give them the clothes, the hugs, the laughter. Yes, today will definitely be another productive day. And as I think about them, I can't help but remember Belle's smile as he left the store. I don't know why, but that image has stayed with me longer than I expected. How odd. Normal narration. Dining room of the civilized Astri family. All the girls, including their goddess, were having breakfast before starting their day. It was Sunday, so it was time to rest and have fun like the girls they were. Hey Asta, let's throw stink bombs at Royman's house, Lyra suggested with an excited smile. Okay, that fat slob deserves it for denying us our vacation, Asta agreed without hesitation, while clenching his fist. Nguyen, who was standing next to them, just shook his head slightly in disappointment as he drank his coffee. What are you thinking, Nguyen? Waiting for one of us to get a boyfriend so you can steal him away? Selty asked, narrowing her eyes. For the 10th time, big-eared girl, just because you dreamed that I stole your boyfriend doesn't mean I'll actually do it, Nguyen whispered wearily. That's what a boyfriend stealer would say, and Rihanna is going down the same path, she said, turning to look at her sister. Selty, lately you've been acting very distrustful towards the two of us. Dreams are not just dreams, they are messages from other worlds. This is all your fault, Knees. For giving her that book of realities and the meanings of dreams. Rihanna accused the wolf. I don't know about you guys, but I dreamt that Nguyen pushed my boyfriend off a cliff, that must mean something. But they don't even have boyfriends. Astri smiled slightly as she watched her daughters interact. It was always fun to see, every day they came up with a new crazy thing to argue about. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Allies asked a small mirror she held in her hands. Oh. There's my reflection. That means. But you're the biggest idiot in the family. Shut up, Kagaya, it's not my fault that the mirrors break with your reflection. Ah, as if I were the stinky elf. Your grandma stinks, Ryu whispered without stopping eating. While everyone was talking, Iska was calmly eating her breakfast, still smiling. Those moments with his family were what he loved most. Did something good happen, Iska? Mariu asked in her soft voice, having already finished her breakfast. In fact, she was always the first to finish. Why do you ask? Iska said, still with that small smile on her face. I don't know, but I've noticed you've been happier than usual these past few days, Mariu repeated as she carefully placed the cup on the table, observing it curiously. Iska tilted her head, pretending to think. Maybe so. Aha! Exclaimed Asta, who was clearly listening. That can only mean two things. Either the wretched woman in that shop died, or you like someone. How I hate that woman, Rihanna whispered with disgust. I still don't understand why you decided to sell your clothes in that store. Well, because it was the only store that accepted it, Iska explained with a nervous smile. They're all just jealous because your work is so much better, Kagaya remarked, making the Amazon smile happily. I still say you should open your own shop. I don't feel ready for something like that yet, plus I'm busy delivering justice, I wouldn't have time to deal with it. Well, when that happens, we'll all be here to help you, Ally said with a radiant smile. Okay, let's not change the subject, Asta said, pointing at Iska with a mischievous smile. Like that, let Mariu said, she's been happier than usual these days, she's got that typical something nice happened to me, and I don't want to talk about it smile. Iska let out a laugh, lowering her gaze slightly towards her plate to disguise it. I just received a good comment about my work, that's all. Comment? Kagaya repeated, raising an eyebrow. From whom? From a client, Iska replied, trying to sound casual, but her slightly reddened ears betrayed her. The praise for her work definitely embarrassed her more than it did her personally. A handsome client? Lyra asked with a mocking smile. Iska tried not to laugh, but she couldn't help but let out a soft giggle. That has nothing to do with it. Sure, Noin murmured from his seat, without taking his eyes off his food, but with a half smile that Iska managed to notice. Well, whoever it is, Astri interjected in a calm but amused voice. I'm glad something motivates you so much, Iska. When you work with a smile, everything turns out better. Iska nodded and took a sip of her tea to hide another small, happy smile. Yes, there's nothing better than enjoying what you do. While the others continued arguing about absurd things and Selty started another verbal fight with Rihanna and Noin about dreams and visions of other worlds, Iska was lost in her thoughts again for a second. She remembered that sincere voice, that curious look, and the way he had said that each garment seemed to have a story. It was just a comment, but one that, for some reason, felt like a little treasure. Passion was definitely her justice. Some time later. The smiling Iska was walking through the streets of her area with 2 bags in her hands. It was clothing for the children at the orphanage where she spent her entire childhood. It was practically his second home and his family. I hope they like the clothes, she thought with a happy smile, already imagining their reactions. Today I made little Yum's favorite dresses. I'm sure she'll be very excited. She still remembered her past as a little girl and what she looked like. That neglected and haggard appearance was very different from how it was now. She didn't want her little sisters to be like her when she was a child. They had to have pretty dresses, as pretty as she was. I wanted to give them a good life, not for them to live the same life she lived, but to give them everything she never had. Maybe I should get them some Jag American too, she muttered to herself, glancing down a street that led to the food stalls. No, Grandma complains that I spoil them, but I'll probably give them to her anyway. She smiled slightly as she remembered how her grandmother was a little strict about junk food, but always ended up giving in. A few won't hurt them. So, having made her decision, Iska took a detour to buy those Jag American, only hoping that the Sword Princess hadn't ransacked the stall like last time. Some Jag American will really brighten your day. I don't walk far, probably about 5 minutes looking for a stall selling that simple but delicious treat. And I soon found him, spotting a small stall on the street being served by. Iska looked curious and somewhat surprised to see who was tending the stall. Belle. That's right, the seller of Jag American was the mutated rabbit. That was something the Amazon did not expect. But although she was surprised, that surprise turned into a slight smile, and she walked towards that stall. For some reason I wanted to get to know him better, to get to know that curious boy better. Good morning. She always greeted with her cheerful attitude. Belle, who had been looking down, opened his eyes in surprise upon hearing that voice that brought color to his days. He recognized that voice instantly. He froze for a moment, feeling an uncomfortable heat rise from his neck to his ears. I didn't expect to find her right there, much less at that moment, working at a small street stall, with her apron half wrinkled, a spatula in one hand, and a cloth hat that Hestia insisted she wear, because it gave her more of a salesman's presence. Inside, a flood of thoughts began to bombard him. Is this how she sees me now? Ridiculous, with this hat that looks bigger than my head. With grease on my hands and my apron covered in stains. She probably thinks I'm a fool who smells of oil and fried potatoes. His depressing thoughts began to come to him, believing that she would look at him with disapproval. But when he looked up again, instead of finding a mocking or awkwardly surprised expression, he came across that wide, luminous smile that seemed to shine brighter than the morning sun itself. No, she wasn't laughing at him. On the contrary, she seemed happy to see him. Clear. He had completely forgotten that Iska was not like the other adventurers. She was different and special. Belle swallowed, trying to compose himself. Iska, she managed to say, her voice still a little shaky. Hello. The Amazon leaned slightly on the counter, inclining a little towards him as if she wanted to shorten any distance, her eyes shining with curiosity. "So here you are," he said in an amused but warm tone. "I didn't know you also work selling American. Interesting." Belle looked away for a second, fighting the feeling that his cheeks must already be completely red. The aroma of hot oil filled the air, and the sound of potatoes frying in the oil filled the place. "Great, just today when I thought I wouldn't see anyone I knew," he thought to himself, feeling his heart beating faster than it should. And of all of them, it had to be her. And yet, as she watched him with those eyes full of curiosity and warmth, something inside her relaxed. Maybe it didn't matter if he looked ridiculous. Not if the person in front of him was looking at him like that. Wow, I didn't expect to see you here, she said with a shy smile, trying to keep her voice from sounding as nervous as she felt, although it was difficult. "I wasn't expecting to see you either," Iska replied with a light laugh. "So this is your secret job? I thought you were just an adventurer." Belle scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed. "Well, actually I'm helping my goddess. This position is hers." "Wow. That's amazing," Iska said, looking at all the potatoes. "I'm glad to see you helping your goddess with her work." Belle turned to take some freshly fried potatoes out of the oil, trying not to let his hands tremble at her mere presence. Iska watched him with a calm smile, her elbows resting on the wooden edge of the small stall. "And you?" he asked, trying to break the silence and at the same time try to calm himself down. "What are you doing here?" "I've just come from doing some shopping," she replied, lifting the bag she was carrying while lying. "Clothes for the children at the orphanage." "Ah," Belle smiled gently. "That's very kind of you." And obviously Belle knew that she had made those clothes, or at least that's what she thought after seeing that whole section of garments made by her. "Well," Iska tilted her head, a gleam of pride in her eyes. "They're like my little brothers and sisters. They deserve the best, and if I can give it to them, I will without hesitation." Belle listened attentively. There was something about her voice, a warmth that wasn't forced. There was none of that arrogant tone he'd noticed in so many adventurers. No, Iska spoke like someone who truly cared. She was genuine. She didn't need to pretend. "And the American?" he asked as he prepared one and wrapped it in paper. "They're an extra treat. Grandma says I shouldn't spoil them with junk food, but she made a mischievous gesture with her hand I can't resist. It warms my heart to see their eyes sparkle with excitement." Belle let out a small laugh, the first since she had arrived. Little by little, her nerves were disappearing, just like that day in the clothing store. "I think you're going to make their day really bright." "I hope so, although you've also made mine happy today." The phrase came out of Iska naturally, as if it were something obvious. And indeed it was so, he found his best client, in fact, he was the only client he had ever met in person. Belle felt her heart leap and forced herself to focus on wrapping the potatoes. She couldn't let her face get any redder than it already was. "Here you go," she finally said, handing him a small bag. "They're freshly made." "Perfect," Iska said, taking the bag, and before putting it in one of her own, she picked up one of the crispy chips and tasted it right there. Exactly as I remembered them, it's been a while since I've had them. Delicious." Belle smiled at that reaction. Sometimes she acted like a mature woman, and other times, like at that moment, she acted like a happy little girl over a sweet treat. And for some reason I felt that I still knew almost nothing about her. "I'm glad you like them." She watched him for a moment, and Belle felt that her gaze not only lingered on his face, but pierced through him, as if she were trying to truly understand him. "You know," Iska finally said. "When I first met you, I thought you were just a quiet adventurer who gets lost in a area, but seeing you here makes me think you're more interesting than you seem." Belle blinked, surprised by the comment. "Interesting? I don't know if selling potatoes counts as something interesting." "Of course it matters," she interrupted with a confident smile. "Not just anyone takes the time to help their goddess like this. It says a lot about you, and it's good not to be ashamed of working this way. My grandmother always told me not to be ashamed of your work. If it's honest work, be proud of what you do and never feel ashamed. The day you steal or scam people, that will be a reason to be ashamed." Belle felt those words strike him in a strange way, as if they had caught him off guard. He wasn't used to being looked at like that, without judgment, without mockery, without being underestimated, since that was how Rario had received him since he arrived, with the exception of about 3 people. But Iska, she was so different. "Thank you," she replied sincerely. "I guess I'm just doing the best I can." "And that's more than many people do," Iska said, adjusting one of her bags. "You're an amazing kid, Belle." A brief silence settled between them, broken only by the steady sound of the oil. It wasn't awkward. Rather, it was peaceful. "And what will you do next?" Belle asked. "I'll take this to the orphanage, spend some time with the children, and then maybe train a little," she replied, glancing at him with a half smile. "And you? What will you do after that?" "Stay here until the end of your shift." After that, well, maybe train too. Do you train a lot? She asked with genuine interest. Yes, well, I'll try. I wouldn't tell him that his training was to go down to the dungeon and let whatever happens, happen. Maybe we can train together someday, Iska suggested playfully, though not entirely jokingly. It'll be interesting. I want to see what you're capable of. Bell felt a knot in his stomach, not from fear, but from the strange mixture of nerves and excitement. Training with Iska. That scenario was perfect for making a fool of myself in front of her hundreds of times, since making a fool of myself was her specialty. He was a professional in that respect. I could be, he replied, trying to sound casual, although his voice betrayed him. He may be someday. And after that exchange of words, they both fell silent again, Iska with a cheerful smile, and Belle somewhat nervously trying to hide it as he put potatoes in the oil. Well, I should go now, or the children will think I got lost along the way like you, I joke a little before turning around. I'm glad to have seen you, Iska. Same here, Belle, and before walking away, he winked at him. Keep taking good care of those Jag-American. Goodbye. And keeping that happy smile, Iska walked away from the ready place to visit the orphanage. As Belle watched her disappear into the crowd, he felt the stall suddenly become a little emptier, a little quieter. She always fills everything with color when she appears, he thought, his eyes sparkling. Or so it was until the smell of burning reached him. The potatoes. With Iska. As she walked down the street, Iska smiled without realizing it. It wasn't that anything spectacular had happened, nor that the conversation had been particularly deep. But there was something in the way Belle looked at her, in how genuinely happy he seemed to see her, that left a warm feeling in her chest. It's good to see him again, she thought, gripping the bags a little tighter. She didn't know why, but she was happy. And that simple, real joy would accompany her all the way to the orphanage. And something inside her urged her to get to know that albino boy better. I feel like we'll see each other more often. End of chapter. Chapter 4. Belle. I know I promised. The day Ina told me the truth behind Iska and the dozens of rejections she gave every month, that day was like someone had shaken me up inside. I promised myself I would be strong for her. Not just strong in the sense of wielding a sword or defeating monsters, but someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her, who could protect her if she ever needed it. That I wouldn't be just another run-of-the-mill adventurer. That I would make an effort. That I would stop making excuses. Words, yes, cheesy words that any love-struck boy with his head full of illusions would probably say. But I seriously thought about it. And yet. What, a week or two has passed since then. And in all that time I've only interacted with Iska a few times. I could count them on my fingers. Even so, those few times have been enough for me to start getting to know her a little better. And the more I get to know her, the more I realize something that leaves me both unsettled and fascinated. She doesn't seem like the type of person who would be attracted to someone because of their fame or how strong they are. Of course, I know I'm drawing conclusions without really knowing her, but that's the feeling she gives me every time she looks at me. And I don't think he cares if someone is ugly or attractive either. It's curious. From what I know, Iska is one of those girls who takes care of every last detail of her appearance, her clothes, her hair, even the way she walks. Always impeccable, always projecting confidence and beauty. But despite that, she doesn't seem superficial. She doesn't seem like the type who would be swayed by something as simple as physical beauty. She is so much more than that. And that's why it's complicated. Not in a bad way, but in that kind of complexity that makes you want to spend hours trying to solve a riddle. My grandfather used to tell me, no matter how close you are to a person, even if you've seen them grow up, even if you know their laughter and their tears, you never truly know them completely. And if that's true, how could I possibly get to know Iska completely in just a few weeks? But still. I want to understand her. I want to know what attracts you to a boy. I want to know what those little actions are that please her and what those are that cause someone to irrevocably lose points with her. As she never had a boyfriend because she's not really interested in a relationship or because she hasn't found the right person yet. Those are the questions that haunt me right before I fall asleep. The ones that won't leave me alone. It's frustrating. Very frustrating. But at the same time, it's a challenge I don't want to give up on. I want him to look at me differently someday. I want him to start noticing my existence beyond a casual greeting. But I also don't want it to be forced. I don't want to act like someone I'm not just to get their attention. I want it to be because if he ever looks at me that way, it's because he truly feels it. I don't know if that makes me naive or just a romantic fool. Being in love is complicated. The day is another day in Arario. And although I have no idea what awaits me, I know that one way or another I will try to take another step to get closer to her. Normal narration. The midday sun bathed the streets of Arario in a gentle warmth. It was one of those quiet days when the hustle and bustle of the city was very calm, one of those days that relaxed you. And amidst all that tranquility was our protagonist. Bell wandered aimlessly, enjoying his short break. After spending the entire morning helping out at Jag American's post, Hestia had sent him to get something to eat since it was already lunchtime and besides, his shift was over. In the afternoon he would go to the dungeon for a few hours and see what was happening. So he decided to go find a place to eat and regain his energy. The problem was that, as always, I had no idea where to go. Why do I always end up going around in the same places? He muttered, looking around. I didn't know the city very well yet, so I didn't know which restaurants were more affordable and which weren't. And that day I couldn't find a street stall to buy anything. Which one will have delicious food at a good price? Bell thought, tapping his chin with a finger as he looked at the restaurants he passed. He only had 10,000 valis, and that should have been enough for him. Damn poverty, he whispered in frustration. Then, as he turned a corner, he saw a place that caught his attention. Next to a small stone fountain there was a restaurant. It wasn't luxurious or flashy, just a simple place with wooden tables and a terrace with flower pots. He moved a little closer to see the prices on the sign at the entrance and was pleased to see that there were dishes affordable for his budget. I think I've finally found my place, she thought with a slight smile. But before going in, she felt the need to turn around and look at one of the windows of the shop, something that made her heart beat rapidly. There was a person sitting alone at a table with a calm expression. Black hair tied in a bun, tanned skin, and a glass of juice in her hand. Word of mouth. Bell felt his heart leap. Iska, he whispered her name, staring intently at the Amazon. She was alone, gazing out the window with a serene smile, completely oblivious to her surroundings. Bell hesitated for a few seconds, debating whether to greet her or pretend he hadn't seen her. I didn't want to bother her. Maybe she wanted to be alone, or maybe she was waiting for someone. The best thing would be to leave and find another place for lunch. But then she turned her head and their eyes met, making Bell's heart leap. The sparkle of surprise in Iska's eyes was instantaneous, followed by a smile so warm that Bell forgot to breathe for a second. The Amazon quickly signaled for him to enter the restaurant and Bell, somewhat nervous, went inside. Bell. She exclaimed, raising a hand to greet him. What a coincidence. Bell approached somewhat awkwardly, trying not to appear nervous, although he already seemed to be. Hello, Iska, I didn't expect to find you here. Neither do I, she replied with a beautiful smile, gesturing to the chair in front of her. Are you busy? Or do you have time to have lunch with me? I'm waiting for the waiter, so I haven't ordered anything yet. Belle blinked in surprise. With you? Of course. She said naturally, tilting her head and smiling. Or would you prefer to eat alone? I want to eat with you. Those words only made Belle's heart race even faster and he tried to maintain his composure. Then no. Of course not. He rushed to reply, noticing how several people in the restaurant turned around when they heard him speak louder than necessary. I mean yes, I'd love to. Iska let out a small laugh at his reaction and waited for him to sit down. Bell put his backpack aside and settled himself in front of her, trying not to look too tense. It's good to see you, Iska said. Did you just get out of the station or the dungeon? From the post today was a quiet morning, although a bit hot, he replied, scratching the back of his neck. And you? I went out to do some shopping, she explained, discreetly pointing to a bag next to her seat. I was going to grab a quick lunch before heading home. But look at that, it seems luck decided to give me company today, pleasant company. Bell smiled shyly, feeling a pleasant warmth in his chest. He didn't know if it was because of Iska's words or the way she'd said them, as if she were genuinely happy to see him. In fact, the Amazon was happy to see him. Just then, a waiter approached to take their order. Iska ordered a pasta dish with vegetables and Belle, unsure of what to order, opted for the same. You know, she said as the waiter walked away, I found this place recently. It doesn't seem very well known, but the food is delicious. And the atmosphere, I like it. It's a quiet place to eat with friends. Belle looked around. The place was filled with small tables covered in cream-colored tablecloths. The sound of the nearby fountain mingled with the soft voices of other patrons, creating a sense of calm rarely found in Horario. You're right, he said. It's different. Sometimes it's good to escape the noise for a bit, Iska commented. Horario can be a beautiful city, but it's also exhausting. Belle nodded. Yes, I know very well. I suppose it must be even more chaotic for someone like you, Iska said, resting an elbow on the table and his cheek in his hand, observing him with a curious expression. Novice adventurer, helper at a food stall, it seems you don't have much time for yourself, do you? Belle let out a soft laugh, more out of nervousness than anything else. Well, not really. But it doesn't bother me. I like to keep busy. I feel like if I stop, I fall behind. Are you late? She repeated curiously. Yes, I want to improve. To be stronger, more reliable, someone others don't have to worry about. Iska watched him for a few seconds in silence. There was something genuine in the way he said it, something that went beyond the simple words of a young dreamer. You have a curious way of thinking, she finally said, with a slight smile. But I like it. Not many people see hard work as something beautiful, and I like that about you. Elle looked up, a little surprised by her words and at the same time embarrassed. Thanks. Then the waiter arrived with their food and they immediately started eating. Wow, this is delicious, Belle whispered with a sparkle in her eyes. Isn't that right? That's why I like this place, said the Amazon with a beautiful smile. How he loved that smile. Belle nodded, trying not to stare at her for too long, but it was impossible not to. The way the midday light streamed through the window and fell upon her face made her tanned skin glow, as if the sun itself were admiring her. She tried to focus on her plate. She ate another bite of pasta, but the flavor, however delicious, felt almost distant. Her mind was elsewhere. I was having lunch with Iska, it all happened so suddenly that I hadn't even processed it yet. Is something wrong? Iska asked, tilting her head slightly, noticing his lost gaze. Belle blinked, coming to. Oh. No, nothing, I was just thinking that you have good taste in choosing restaurants. Good taste? She repeated, amused. I'm glad to hear that. Although I must admit I came here purely by chance the first time. I almost went in because I liked the flowers at the entrance. I love flowers. Belle smiled when he heard that. She was a unique girl. Sometimes the best things are found like that, without looking for them, Belle whispered, still with that smile. Iska looked at him for a second longer than necessary with a soft, almost surprised expression. She had to admit that she liked those words. You're right, she finally whispered. I think that applies to people too. Sometimes you find someone special without even looking. That sentence left him completely blank. For a moment he didn't know if she was talking to herself or if she was referring to him. The silence between them lasted only a second, but it felt longer, denser. To break it, Belle grabbed his glass of water, but as he did, the base slipped through his fingers. In an attempt to stop the spill, his hand collided with Iska's, who had also reached out to help him. Their fingertips brushed against each other. The contact was brief, but that alone was more than enough. Belle felt an electric shock run up his arm, and when he looked up he found her bright eyes staring at him closely. For a moment neither of them spoke. The Amazon was the first to react, letting out a soft giggle as she withdrew her hand. Be careful, you're going to get my lunch wet and it's delicious. I'm sorry, Belle replied, blushing to his ears from that hand contact they had. For God's sake, he was behaving like an idiot by being embarrassed about that. Don't worry, she said with that calm smile that seemed to erase any awkwardness. Although I must admit something. What? He asked, still embarrassed. I like seeing you nervous, Iska said, letting out a cute laugh before taking another bite of pasta as if nothing had happened. Delicious. Belle stared at her, speechless, as his mind tried to process what he had just heard. And without being able to stop it, a small smile appeared on her lips. Not because he fully understood her, but because for the first time he felt that something was beginning to change between them. They were no longer just acquaintances. That was changing. Something small but real. The kind of spark that only appears when two people truly begin to connect and realize how comfortable it feels to be together. Elle took a deep breath, trying to relax. The atmosphere no longer felt as tense as before. Little by little, the words began to flow more easily. You're right, he said, playing with his fork. It's delicious. Although I think the flavor was slightly ruined by the scare you gave me. Iska laughed. Scared? Don't exaggerate, I barely touched your hand. That's precisely why, Belle replied, glancing at her sideways. Sometimes the smallest things can be the most dangerous. She looked at him, raising an eyebrow with a curious smile. Are you talking about me or the glass of water? For both of them, I think, he said, laughing nervously. The Amazon burst into laughter, causing several people in the restaurant to turn and look at her. Belle, on the other hand, just stared at her, unable to stop a strange warmth from spreading through his chest. There was something about that laugh, something that made everything else seem to stop. You're weird, Belle, Iska finally said when she calmed down. Strange? He asked. Yes, she replied, resting her chin on her hand. Almost all the adventurers I know try to impress me with stories of their battles or how much they've leveled up. But you only talk about simple things. Well, I guess I'm just an ordinary guy, Belle replied with a shrug. I don't have anything impressive to say. Iska shook her head. You're wrong. Simple things can also be valuable. Belle looked at her in surprise and she added in a softer voice. In a world like ours, where everyone wants to stand out or be the strongest, finding someone who still appreciates simplicity is refreshing, and that's why, even though we don't know each other very well, I like spending time with you. The young man felt his cheeks heat up. He tried to hide it by taking another bite of pasta, though he almost choked from nerves. "Are you okay?" Iska asked with an amused smile as she handed him his glass of juice. "Why yes, only the pasta was really good," he replied, taking a sip of the juice. The Amazon laughed again. "Tonto." The conversation continued in a lighter tone. They talked about everyday things, about how he met his goddess, about Belle's training, about the children at the orphanage, and how difficult it was to keep them still at bedtime. "One of them, Tama, insists that when he grows up he wants to be an adventurer," Iska remarked proudly. "He says he's going to hunt monsters and bring back a giant crystal to decorate the entrance of the orphanage." Belle smiled. "Wow, that sounds like me when I was a kid. Well, except for the glass. I just wanted to be a hero." "A hero, huh?" Iska repeated, resting his elbows on the table and interlacing his fingers. "And you still want to be one?" Belle remained silent for a moment. Not because he doubted, but because the question made him look back to the past. "Yes, but I don't think so in the same way as before. Before, I just wanted to be admired, for someone to look at me and say, 'That boy is so brave.' Now," he paused, searching for the right words. "Now I just want to help. To protect the people I care about." Iska watched him intently, as if trying to etch those words into her mind. Then she nodded slowly. "Then you already are," he said with a calm smile. "True heroes don't become heroes through fame, but through heart." Belle didn't know what to say. He wanted to say something witty, but the words just wouldn't come. He simply smiled, grateful for the sincerity with which she looked at him. The rest of the meal passed with laughter, anecdotes, and comfortable silences. For the first time, Belle felt able to talk to her without stumbling over his words, without the constant fear of looking foolish. He discovered that Iska had a very particular sense of humor, sarcastic at times, but always sweet and warm. When they finished eating, Belle insisted on paying his share, but Iska refused with a joking smile. "Absolutely not," he said, raising a hand. "I was the one who invited you, remember?" "Why yes," but he tried to protest without much success. "No buts. Next time we eat together you can pay," she said, making it clear that this wouldn't be the last time. Belle had no choice but to accept that the Amazonian woman would pay the bill. In fact, she had just realized that she barely had enough money to pay for both of their meals. He really was an idiot. They paid the bill and left the restaurant together. Outside the sun was already gentler and the streets were starting to get less crowded. Belle and Iska had started walking together the moment they left the restaurant, perhaps looking for the right moment to say goodbye to that unplanned outing. Iska paused for a moment in front of a fountain and closed her eyes for a second, letting the gentle breeze stir her hair. Belle watched her without saying a word, captivated by the simple yet beautiful image. "The day was a good day, or rather, a good lunch," she said, opening her eyes. "One of those lunches you don't plan, but that end up making you smile. They're fun." "Yes," Belle agreed with a smile. "I think it was one of the best lunches I've ever had." Iska looked at him amused. "For the food or for the company?" Belle was silent, surprised by the question. But then he took a deep breath and answered honestly. "For both reasons, although if I have to choose, for the company." For a moment, Iska seemed speechless. Then, a soft genuine smile appeared on her face, though a slight blush rose to her cheeks, which she tried to hide. "You know, Belle, sometimes you say really nice things without realizing it." She remembered the day they bought his clothes and how he praised her work, even though he didn't know they were hers. "It was something nice that I cherished." Iska took one of the flowers from the pots by the fountain, a small white daisy, and carefully placed it in Belle's jacket pocket. "So that you remember this day." Belle looked at her in surprise, lowering his gaze towards the flower. Thank you, I'll take care of it." "You'd better," she said with an amused smile as she started walking alongside Belle. For some reason they didn't want to say goodbye yet. They wanted to chat a little longer. They had discovered, or at least Iska had discovered, that it was pleasant to spend time with that rabbit. "You are different," Iska thought, a small gleam in her eyes as she watched Belle smile. "Very different." They walked together through the sunlit streets, talking nonsense, laughing, and unaware that each step brought them a little closer to each other. And as the wind gently moved the flower in Belle's pocket, he thought that maybe, just maybe, his promise to be someone worthy of her wasn't so far from being fulfilled. End of chapter. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.